Hello, this is Jake Williams from Scoop News Group, and we're talking with Aaron Baillio, the Chief Information Security Officer at the University of Oklahoma. Aaron, we're super excited to have you part of Fal.Con Public Sector. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So, Aaron, I think it's an understatement to say that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed almost every aspect of our world, but how do you think it's changed cybersecurity?
I think the biggest change the pandemic has brought to cybersecurity is more of a shift in focus to the user and how they access and interact with business data. So as a university, we've moved a lot of things to SaaS platforms. We're on Office 365. We use Canvas for our learning management system. That sits on AWS. We have a host of other apps in the cloud. That being said, we still have a lot of core data systems for HR and finance that are still on-prem. So we've really had to analyze where the data lives, how it moves through those systems, and how we want users to access and interact with that data. So it's interesting because from a technology perspective, I don't know that much has changed, but I certainly think that institutions and businesses are looking at tightening data control, looking at user behaviors more closely, and then looking at implementing more controls to ensure that remote workforce stays protected. So it's more of a shift in the focus on data and users and how they interact with systems more than a technology change.
Well, and I think you segued really well into the next point I wanted to cover, and that is the remote workforce, right? We talked about the remote workforce. We've talked about the remote workforce so much since this started, but with so much of the workforce, notably working from home, what's the biggest worry for a CISO when dealing with that?
I think our biggest concerns is what that user might do when they're away from the umbrella of the business or the institution security perimeter. When they know that Big Brother's not looking over their shoulder, are they visiting sites that they might not normally? Are they joining unsecured networks? Are they continuing with patches and updates? Especially when those devices don't check in, to the home network, or ever touch the corporate network while they're away because, so much has moved to the cloud. So I think there's a combination of social and technological issues there, again, that I think keeps CISOs up and wondering, what they're going to do. When people are away from work for so long, I think they tend to lose focus on cybersecurity practices because they're not getting those regular reminders. At work, we might have posters or campaigns or, other things that just kind of help remind people of what they should be doing. And when they're away for so long, I think without those reminders, they're not as vigilant as they should be. So I think the technology pieces can be solved and are being solved with this remote workforce. I think the biggest challenge is making sure that behaviors don't change because they're not at the corporate environment.
I think it's interesting to shift gears a little bit. The cyber community was already dealing with a workforce shortage, even before the pandemic occurred, right? This is a problem that we've been talking about for years. But now, because of the pandemic and because of how things have tightened and changed in terms of the flow of how these decisions are being made and how people are getting hired and into the workforce, automation is a focal point now more than ever. How can agencies like yours make AI their ally?
Automation is certainly a factor in increasing efficiency, especially in cybersecurity. And it certainly plays a part in what we do at our organization. And there's room for AI and machine learning, and we've seen a lot of leaps and bounds being made through that technology and reducing kind of that alert fatigue, reducing noise, for the analyst. That being said, there's still a lot of improvement needed to truly, I think, replace an analyst. Mostly because it's just hard to teach some of the contextual issues and policy issues that every organization has. So for example, we had one of our security tools that was creating a lot of alerts that they categorized as smash and grab. So it looked like, you know, some inbound traffic was collecting a lot of data and sending it outbound. Well, what it turned out to be in reality was Twitch streaming, you know, the gaming service. And so, which on our campus is allowed by policy. Now that might not be the case in many corporate environments, but being who we are, that's something that we allow. So we still see a lot of cases where there's still a need to interact with a human, you know, and an analyst still has to be involved. So I think AI is making a lot of headway and certainly is able to reduce workload on the analyst, create automations, again, that reduce triage time and kind of overall workload for an analyst. So I think there's a lot that we'll see developed in the coming years for AI and kind of replacing that analyst. But, you know, I still think that we will continue to have to tighten our belts, and this workforce shortage will continue, I think, for years to come. I just don't know that we'll ever get rid of the need for some cadre of analysts. But like I said, it's certainly a developing industry, and I think there's a lot of exciting things to come from automation and where AI takes us in this field.
You know, it's interesting too, just because workforces shifted online and just because a pandemic changed everything that we know about daily life, that doesn't mean that ransomware attacks and cybersecurity threats have stopped. How can higher education institutions really break free of ransomware at a time when they can't afford to be crippled by a ransomware attack?
Yeah, certainly. You know, I don't know that anyone can afford it. You know, this is something that kind of almost makes my eyes roll. At this stage in the game, there's so many next-gen antivirus players in the market, app-aware firewalls, secure email gateways. There's really no reason why we can't prevent most of these ransomware attacks. Then with backups and additional user education, this should be a problem that should go away. I mean, really, the technology and the training and awareness is all there to make this a non-issue. But I think a lot of state agencies like higher ed institutions, local municipalities, they need to come to terms with kind of aging security protections. And I know that, you know, working for a government organization, change is hard. I worked for the Department of Defense for many years. Widespread architectural changes, behavioral changes are laborious processes. It can be done. The problem is that, you know, these changes should have been instigated 3 or 4 years ago. So if that had been the case, large-scale ransomware attacks wouldn't be an issue today. Because of budgets, bureaucracy, lack of user education when it comes to email and kind of security awareness, I think we will continue to see large-scale ransomware attacks in the future. But like I said, it's one of those things, like, we have the ability to make this go away. It's just a matter of time before enough people kind of key into key technologies, doing backups, and then providing that user education kind of widespread so that we are changing behaviors on email and email attachments. So, you know, hopefully it doesn't take an incident to kind of kick people into gear. But like I said, hopefully we're looking at some of the examples that have been displayed in the news and taking advantage of those. And then lastly, you know, cyber insurance is certainly a way to kind of protect yourselves from ransomware, at least maybe get some money back in the case that a lot of infrastructure has to be replaced. So there's certainly some options, but this should be a problem that goes away, even with the remote workforce. This should be a largely a non-issue, I think, for most institutions.
And to kind of pull our conversation together and wrap things up here, zooming out a little bit from just ransomware, what other innovations do you think departments like yours could leverage in order to get a leg up when it comes to the threats that they're facing every day?
Yeah, I heard from I was at another conference and said, instead of trying to plug every single hole in the dam, so to speak, just give me 4 or 5 really good technologies, and a good workforce, security workforce, and I think we'd be able to cover 95, 99% of most of the issues that come across our door, and I think that's true. I think so many people are trying to boil the ocean, and instead just need to focus on give me 4 or 5 really good tools instead of trying to spend on every single vertical, and have a very responsive and trained security workforce. That's one thing I would recommend. Not very innovative, but I think it's the concept that you don't have to have a security technology for every single market space. And I think the other thing is, we can do as much as we can technologically to prevent or to rapidly detect and respond to incidents, but to truly change behavior, we're going to have to think of, education and awareness in ways that haven't been before. I think we need to think outside of just the phishing training, which is effective, but we've got to go beyond that to truly change user behavior. And until user behavior is changed, we're still going to be battling the same battles we have for years and years. So that's kind of where I see more innovation coming from is ways of educating the user. Certainly, in the higher ed space, looking at younger and younger age groups from high school to middle school, and even sometimes in elementary school, starting there with conversations about what's appropriate on the internet, how to protect yourself, kind of teaching about your digital identity as early as possible, so that by the time they become adults or come to the university, that they've already experienced a number of training programs. So that's where I hope to see innovation. Certainly things that I'm working on with some of the classes I teach, with some outreach that I'm doing locally. Again, I don't know if that's innovative, but we've got to think beyond just the technology stack when we come to cyber threats that continue to evolve year after year, day after day.
No, I mean, I think that's a great point. I think it's consistent with what we're hearing from a lot of folks, but that's all the time that we have. So Aaron, thank you so much for being part of this today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.